Okay, my name is Michelle Williams, and my son Richard Lee. Richard Lee is Chesterfield County Public Schools Emmett Till and George Floyd. From 2018 to 19, Richard had been denied the following: mental health supports, transitional supports, transitional services, which is all this in a letter that I submitted to Senator Dunnavant. From 2019 to current 2021, Chesterfield has refused to honor an agreement that was put in place for Richard's education. My son Richard went from a vibrant, active, 156-pound young man with hopes of working as a civilian for the military, sales, GameStop, going to college. Richard transformed to a 286-pound male who cried, felt his life was hopeless. He began to elope. Richard's functional abilities deteriorated. Upon this, as it relates to the applied studies diploma that he was afforded, it was founded that there were no measures in place to ensure that Richard was able to become an independent individual. Through all of this, the school division, including deciding to send me to federal court, which there is a split decision on. I've heard throughout these Senate committee meetings, most valuable, most vital. Well, let's have that same energy in passing Senate Bill 1288, which will allow for students to get what they need, to help to hold school officials who sit in IEP meetings accountable, and make them understand what they need to do for all students. And I, Michelle Williams, am in support of Senate Bill 1288, in support of Richard.
Thank you for your time. The current IEP process is such that many parents do not know how to advocate for their children, be it due to language barriers, cultural barriers, working so many hours that they don't have the time to contact teachers and counselors during school hours. The children are the ones who suffer as a result. Special education and the IEP process must be reformed so that every child who needs additional services will be able to get those services. Moreover, COVID and virtual school have left many students with IEPs without any services if they didn't qualify for the limited in-person services. This must be fixed as soon as possible before these students fall even further behind. I ask that you vote for the bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. I'm Mike Asip, and I represent Virginia Council of Administrators of Special Education. And we include over 400 members who actually supervise the services of over 164,000 Virginia students with disabilities. I want to thank Senator Dunnavant for her support for students with disabilities and her desire to improve services and procedures for them and their families. Senate Bill 1288 is a comprehensive bill, including about 20 of the 27 JLARC recommendations just released over a month ago. While VK supports many of these recommendations and will look for opportunities to advocate for them, we do have reservations regarding the rapid pace the General Assembly is considering them at this time. Our concerns are more procedural versus substantive because we agree with most of the recommendations in the JLARC. JLARC took a year to collect info and make recommendations, yet we are going to be making a decision in just a few minutes, mere minutes. VCASE believes the General Assembly should not put into code significant changes that VDOE and the Board of Education can implement without code. Special education is already the most regulated arena of K-12 public education. While improvements need to be made, and we will support those recommendations, VDOE and the Board of Education have already begun and are planning to do a lot with JLARC recommendations prior to codifying these mandates. And we can provide examples to that. The SB 1288 also actually exceeds JLARC recommendations with at least 7 mandates in the bill that are not recommended to the General Assembly for consideration by JLARC. While there's no shortage of special education regulations, there are critical shortages of funding and teachers. I encourage you to read the report that indicates that the local share of costs has grown to 69%, with federal support relatively flat and state share declining. Only 1% of the VDOE's special ed staff, 55 leadership team positions, are funded through state funds, 99% through federal IDEA grant. As I've shared with others, the state has no skin in the game with funding leadership and support for special education throughout our Commonwealth. Implementing JLARC recommendations will cost localities more, and leveraging federal funding as proposed in JLARC and in line 578 of this bill is an inadequate provision. VK strongly supports more direct state funding to localities to support special education coordinator positions that can focus on improved procedures, monitoring, and accountability. We hope the General Assembly can pass House Budget Amendment 145 Pound 31H that will provide $3.96 million directly to localities in this effort to bring us into better compliance. VCASE also prioritizes recruitment and retention of special ed teachers. Critical shortage is a driving factor in our problems with quality of IEPs for our students. We look forward to working with VDOE, legislators, VDOE, and other stakeholders as we thoughtfully take the time to examine and implement many of the JLARC recommendations as we need to improve procedures, services, and outcomes for our students with disabilities. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of SB 1288. And I'd also like to thank Senator Dunnavant for her relentless work and advocacy on behalf of our students with disabilities and our families with disabilities. We must be clear that SB 1288 is about a civil rights law. It is about enforcing and ensuring that the civil rights of students with disabilities and families with disabilities is protected and upheld through quality access to education and opportunities. Now, we want to be clear that if you are a parent or anyone who has participated in an IEP meeting in the Commonwealth of Virginia, you understand that participating in an IEP meeting is like being in a vehicle where someone is driving 75 miles an hour with their eyes closed down 95. There is very little direction, very little competency, very little training. I am a licensed educator, licensed administrator in special education by the Virginia Department of Education. I know firsthand that we are not taught properly on how to implement the IDEA or provide the required training and skills that educators need in order to develop the IEPs that our students require in this ever-changing environment. We can't even get it right regarding technology. And that's a fundamental requirement as far as our kids are concerned to be able to even function in society. In addition, I do want to bring attention to the Applied Studies Diploma, the JLARC study, which I was a part of and our families were a part of. The JLARC study identified the Applied Studies Diploma as just a piece of paper that says, basically, thank you for coming, have a nice day. And so we need to work on how there needs to be an immediate moratorium. I heard the previous speaker say we don't need to move as quickly. Yes, we do. These are the lives of children that are at stake, and we must move with a sense of urgency, like Dr. King often stated. We must issue an immediate moratorium to stop the Applied Studies Diploma from being issued until it is able to equip our children to be productive and employable and independent. That must happen now. That must happen now. And once again, SB 1288 is required. It must be codified because if the Virginia Department of Education, if VCASE, if all of the school divisions were going to do it, they should have done it by now. They should have complied with the guidelines of IDEA by now. Unfortunately, they've assumed a position of with all due deliberate speed, the same mentality that was used regarding Brown v. Board of Education. And we know that took months and months and still has not been, years and years, and still has not been implemented with fidelity. So I encourage this committee to stop parents from having to drive down 95 with their eyes closed, trying to get services for their children because people are not qualified to do it. And I speak to my colleagues as well. Our colleagues want to be educated on how to write IEPs with fidelity. Our colleagues want to have those skills in place, but it is not in place. And it is not a resource issue. It is an allocation issue. I've studied over 18 budgets throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia, including Fairfax, Chesterfield, Henrico, Richmond. It is an allocation issue. These school divisions can afford to pay corporate law firms close to $1,000 an hour, but cannot pay our special educators $50 an hour.
Ms. Lucas, could you please wrap up your comment?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It is an allocation issue in which we must focus on, and J. Lark indicated it was an allocation issue and that the VDOE should not receive additional funding until they manage the funding they have now appropriately. So I'm in support of SB 1288. It is urgent. It is a civil rights issue. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, thanks for having me here today. I just have to preface this with, we need to, again, I agree with Candace, we need to ensure that we're looking at allocation of staff and that we're doing things properly from the get-go. So as a result, you'll find that all of my comments that I'm making today are not only about this bill, but about Senator Dunnavant's bills as well, because they're hard to carve apart from each other. I do want to say up front too, that JLARC did indeed identify many needs that need to be done and taken care of for special education right away. It was very hard, I think, for them to accurately capture, however, the extent to what needs kids have in the Commonwealth that aren't even represented in IEPs, or perhaps they don't have an IEP at all. And that is why we are having an issue with keeping special ed teachers on board. They are overwhelmed with kids who have been ignored by the system for too long. Teachers are overwhelmed with kids who have been ignored and their special ed needs have not been addressed for so long. So this is where our allocation needs are. Instead of helping these kids as soon as they should, they're in meetings fighting parents to help these kids. So I propose, before I even start into my comments, that we should take a look at making sure that we're doing things properly so that everyone will have an easier day at work and kids are actually getting their needs addressed sooner. So I just want to open this with, all students with a disability should receive a FAPE, but it's not happening. Schools are required to screen all students, but they don't. They're required to evaluate, determine needs for services comprehensively and appropriately. It doesn't always happen. And all of this, unfortunately, requires some subjectivity, right? There's certain numbers and data that you look at, but there's still decisions that need to be made, whether or not there's some sort of a suspicion of a disability, or what does this kid need? And is there an educational impact? And unfortunately, we do have a culture at this point where the LEAs use that subjectivity to decide not to do it, or they do it inappropriately. And they're not even evaluating children, but pediatricians refer them in pre-K.
Good afternoon. I'm speaking today to ask that you support Bill 1288. It's clear from the JLARC and other studies completed this year regarding special education in Virginia that improvements must be made. I implore you to stop kicking this can down the road. This is just too important. And it's time for us to improve access to special education and reform the IE process. As a parent of a special needs student, I say that it's time for our students to stop being an afterthought. How we choose to treat our most challenging students says a lot about our values and our priorities. And I hope you will prioritize passing this bill this year, which incorporates the recommendations from JLARC. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to start by saying that one of my favorite quotes from Socrates said, "The secret of change is to focus all of your energy, not on fighting the old, but building the new." I would then like to address when Mr. Michael Asip said that he feels like this is moving too quickly. Sir, we've given you 5 years. My child Parker, 12 years old, they want to force him into middle school and he's reading and comprehending on kindergarten and first grade levels. Our school division, Chesterfield County Public Schools, still refuses to give my child an IEP or add any accommodations to his 504. So I agree, we've given them way too long and the JLARC study proved it, and SB 1288 will fix most of my child's issues, if not all of them. Thank you.
I'm Chair Tom Smith with the Superintendent's Association. I do want to associate my comments with Mr. Asip, not commenting on the specific recommendations, but there is an issue in terms of process. I've been involved in special ed in one way or another in Virginia since 1977, 3 years after 94-142, which the original law was. I've been a teacher, administrator, as well as a superintendent. no more complicated process than special ed. Rightfully so, there's sincere protections that are there for the child and for the family. The department is looking at the recommendations. They're asked, they've said that, and Superintendent Lane has said that they're moving on those recommendations. And before putting these specifics into code, which is hard to change because it is an evolving process, it has for the 30+ years that I've been involved with it. Perhaps what you want to do is understand what they're doing, hear from them in order to make sure that we're not moving too fast. And in actuality, we'll have to make further changes, which will be more complicated once they're through with their work. Thank you.
Chair, members of the subcommittee, Stacey Haney speaking on behalf of the Virginia School Boards Association. I just want to address one concern that we see with this, and that relates to funding or the lack thereof. As Dr. Asip mentioned, special education is already the most highly regulated area in anything that we do in the school division. And so what I would caution you is don't think that adding more regulation is going to fix the problems. The problems that we're seeing at the local level with, Senator Dunnavant talked about teachers being unprepared, things like that. Those things are a direct result of the inadequate funding for public education that has gone on for years. The special education teachers being underprepared, as Jay Lark mentioned, that's a result of the teacher shortage. That's a result of high turnover in these positions. What we need to fix these problems are better funding so that we can pay our teachers more. What we need is additional support staff to support these special education teachers and to support the students that they serve. These are all support staff positions that we lost when the support staff cap was implemented over a decade ago. And so there are definitely concerns in education that need to be addressed, but what we need is adequate funding to fix these problems. And I would just urge the members of the committee to keep that in mind as things move. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon, everyone here. I'm Zara Lakhani, mother of Shazeb Lakhani, who's diagnosed with Down syndrome as his genetic disability documented in school system. Give me 1 second. He's also with the ID as an uninformed consent taken from the parent, changed the categories. With everything said here, I support this bill 1288 for taking the applied study diploma out of the picture, because based on that, our children are being held off from educational benefits that are assigned under the federal and state laws, but they're using against our children. I'm spending over $53,000 a year to educate my child outside the school system to make sure that his needs are being provided, which are socially, emotionally, and educationally, and still he's not being provided what he needs. Outside the schools, we've been able to document all of his success and achievements, and school has been unable to document that in his cumulative folders, just because he was destined to this unconsented, uninformed consent from the parent as an ID, and he was assigned to special education diploma or decided on his book as a golden seal, that he's never going to be able to achieve anything what his peers without disabilities can achieve. In support of that, first thing we need to do is change the criteria of the standards of learning. We need to provide those textbooks. We need to provide those workbooks, just like the child without the disability has been provided in their classrooms. My child was assigned when he was 4 years and 2 months old, destined to deprive for his educational needs. I just want to make a final note. It is the inability of those who cannot provide and lack with the skills and wills to provide our children. And we should take this applied study diploma, which is now research-based, incompetent to our children with the special disabilities.
Hi, I want to support Senate Bill 1288. I want you to know that teachers do need training. I am a retired educator, and I've taught every grade level. I hear from 3-year-olds to 80-year-olds. And teachers need training, and parents need training. And we don't need to be taking teachers out of classrooms when they need to fill out these IEPs. They are important, but we need to do it with fidelity and honesty. We need to educate all children. At the same time, we know that some children have different levels of achievement. And to do anything that would hinder that child being as successful as he can or she when they graduate is wrong. And we need to change it ASAP. And we need to stop making excuses. And I'm sorry, administrators have a hard time. I'm going to fall down on the side of a child, the parents, and the teachers, not administrators. Thank you.